For quite some time now, Pokemon has been quite a joke of a franchise, and for a pretty good reason. Pokemon has become so formulaic and it's lost its direction over time. For quite some time, sales were slipping, and Pokemon's appeal was limited to several different kinds of people, including kids, college students who shop at Hot Topic and still gush over things they were into as a kid, people who never grew up, and furries. However, while normally I would have mentioned that Pokemon is a dying franchise and that it's going to become irrelevant in a few years, something happened a few months ago that gave the Pokemon franchise a shot in the arm. Nintendo released the mobile game Pokemon Go, and it was a smash hit on the level of games like Angry Birds, Candy Crush, Clash of Clans, or Temple Run. For a few weeks, it seemed like everybody was into it, and it was pretty surreal to see. People were literally becoming smartphone zombies, playing this game everywhere they possibly could, including Holocaust memorials, the 9/11 memorial, government sites, protected areas, and more. People were going to the bad parts of town late at night only to get robbed, sometimes on live streams, and sex offenders were using lures to attract kids, along with robbers. People were falling off cliffs playing it, running on highways, and of course playing the game while driving, and then crashing into cars, including police cars. It's enough material for any aspiring cyberpunk fiction writer to get ideas from, and in fact, I remember an episode of Serial Experiments Lane with a similar premise. For a few weeks in July and August of 2016, Pokemon Go was a very surreal event to watch unfold. There was video footage of crowds gathering in public places to try to catch a certain rare Pokemon, or because there was a gym somewhere. And of course, thanks to Pokemon Go, let's not forget that I actually saw at least one in public. I saw this with my own eyes. I saw a mom with her husband and family playing Pokemon Go on her cell phone in the middle of a crowded restaurant. Yeah, I actually saw that with my own eyes. Even as players left Pokemon Go to move on to the next big social media craze on Facebook timelines, the impact was felt. Pokemon still has some brand value left, and if anything, Pokemon Go renewed the phrase Pokemon in the minds of America, and many gamers who don't own a 3DS. At the same time, though, Pokemon Go is not a game made for Nintendo's dedicated gaming hardware, and Pokemon Go also only features Pokemon from the original games, also known as Generation 1. While updates are coming to add in Generation 2 Pokemon, Generation 2 is about as well known as Generation 1 is. Meanwhile, in the land of the Mushroom Kingdom, Game Freak is still churning out new Pokemon titles on the aging Nintendo 3DS, which is soon to be replaced. Similar to Generation 5, which was Black and White, and Generation 2, which was Pokemon Gold and Silver, Game Freak is releasing a new generation of Pokemon games before the new Nintendo Switch comes out. Now, sure, you'd think they'd wait it out a bit, but this is Game Freak after all, and they have to milk Pokemon for all it's worth, and it makes sense that Game Freak would milk the 3DS one last time before it becomes irrelevant, just like what they did with the Game Boy and the DS, where they put out one last game on there to milk it until the next system came out. And well, it's easy to say that Pokemon is stagnated, and this is for a pretty good reason. Game Freak isn't willing to take any sort of risks anymore with Pokemon. Their formula is to take last year's game, add a few new features and random Pokemon that they threw at the wall and thought would stick, remove a few features, make a new map, and write a quick flimsy excuse for a story, and then throw it out the door and watch as it sells millions, as numerous people quit buying snacks for a week, save up lunch money, open up art commissions, and beg mom for more allowance money to get it. And well, the best way to prove this is to actually take a look at Pokemon Sun and Moon itself. When you first start Pokemon Sun and Moon, you get thrown right into the intro of the game, where the professor is telling you about Pokemon and whatnot as you move to the Alola region. See, it's a pun on Aloha, a common word used in Hawaii. Get it? Ha ha ha. And this is the only thing that the game wastes no time doing, because the game is a giant slog. And you'll know what I mean when I tell you more about it. You are then allowed to pick your character from a list of icons instead of genders, and for the first time in Sun and Moon, you are no longer asked what your gender is. Who knows? Maybe Game Freak actually took a satirical image mocking coddled teenagers with identity issues seriously. Keep in mind, however, it's easier to just drop genders than it is to provide 71 different genders and a fill-in-the-blank option, and considering that Pokemon is a mass-market game trying to go for as big of a target audience as possible, it makes some sense. The last thing Nintendo wants are boycott campaigns and images of people burning video games all because players were asked to choose a gender. After all, it's 2016! Once you start Sun and Moon, you're loaded with references to previous Pokemon games as usual. There's a Meowth in your house, Pikachu gear is there too because Pikachu is the most marketed Pokemon, the TV is still showing the 1986 movie Stand By Me, and of course you move from another town. And then the game holds your hand because the game assumes you're a kid who knows nothing about Pokemon, or that you can't play video games, with no option to skip all this forced stuff. And this drags on and on about as much as Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon did, as you get to see Pokemon go even further with its failed attempts at trying to feel cinematic. The game introduces you to its cookie-cutter story, which is about as deep as every other Pokemon story, but falls flat due to the fact that the game shoves it in your face. I mean, it's one thing if a game is really pushing a story, but try to make it interesting, at least. The game is even more linear than Pokemon Generation 6 was, and I mean the other characters will even correct you if you try to go the wrong way. There are also plenty of obstacles to block the paths to ensure you go the way the game wants you to, from non-player characters redirecting you to Tauroses, in case you needed to know that you have to play the game the way it wants you to. If the Pokemon fanbase had the same sense of humor the Sonic ROM hacking or Doom modding community does, there'd be a ROM hack of an older Pokemon game that blocks off half the paths, with Snorlaxes, Tauroses, and old men going crazy, and has non-player characters telling you to do this and that. It also has to have an annoying talking Pokédex telling you to do things as well, and the map in the bottom screen tells you what to do and features a waypoint so you know where the game wants you to go. While the game changes around a few things, many of the core elements are still in place for Pokemon Sun and Moon storyline. Team Evil makes a return, gym leaders are replaced, but the same concept applies. There's still a professor, you still choose a Pokemon, you still live with a single mom, and of course, you still need to catch them all. Just because there are cinematic cutscenes and some aspects swapped doesn't make the game new or fresh, unless the only role-playing games you've ever played are ones with the Pokemon logo on them. In which case, I could forgive you to an extent for not knowing that there are role-playing games that don't have the Pokemon logo on them out there. If anything, the quality of the writing combined with the fact that the cutscenes drag on gives you the impression that the game is closer to, say, a Sonic title, in 3D that is, in terms of quality, than the big-budget role-playing games this game tries to ape. I mean, it's a kid's game for crying out loud, and yet it takes itself so seriously that you can't hit a button to skip all these long cutscenes and other pretentious bullshit that the game makes you do. The battle system is, you guessed it, the exact same thing, other than some very minor tweaks that nobody outside of a Smogon user would notice. However, now the game will tell you when moves are super effective. The game also features these new Z moves, which are supercharged moves, and only one can be used per battle. There's also a tie-in tool you can buy that vibrates, lights up, and makes sounds when you use the Z moves in-game. Who needs to buy an expensive E46 or a RX-7 when you can go to your college classes wearing a plastic Pokemon toy for kids and a Pokewalker and having a 3DS in your pocket and be the coolest dude around in your own mind? Oh yeah, and did I mention that the art direction in Sun and Moon is pretty poor as well? It's possibly one of the worst I've seen in any video game. It's bland, it has these ugly outer lines, and while the human models look more like actual humans this time around, it also makes the game look kind of off with this game's art style. I mean, even Pokemon Coliseum on the GameCube looked better, and the GameCube is an old system. The graphics in Sun and Moon look lazy, it's not pleasant to look at, but you can probably find a million whoa so cute XD gifs of Sun and Moon online. I think the only art style worse than Sun and Moon's is that Tumblr 90s influenced art style that looks like it has these ugly neon cyan and magenta colors that every snowflake uses and adores as they fetishize older PC98 and CGA graphics while wanting to jump in ball pits while wearing safety pins. Pokemon Sun and Moon's character design falls flat. Most of the new Pokemon are just more of the same design something and throw it at the wall hoping it sticks style characters similar to Generation 6. However, not only are there new Pokemon in Generation 6, but there are even new regional variations of Pokemon, which are recolors that took even less effort to design than Mega Evolutions. But hey, there are several fur-based Pokemon, which means that some furries are going to be opening up commissions to pay for it. Pokemon Sun and Moon also relies on older Pokemon quite a bit, and similar to X and Y, from Route 1 you'll run into numerous older Pokemon along with new Pokemon that revisit the same cliches as older generations did. There's also a new Rotom Pokédex feature, which features Rotom, a Pokemon from Generation 4 that most people forgot about after Platinum when Game Freak made up new mythologies for 2 more generations of Pokemon that literally nobody cared about. Due to the fact that Rotom is in this Pokédex designed for it, Rotom is one of the few Pokemon in the main series that can talk. So what do the writers do with it? Rotom, at least according to the localizers, is mostly used to tell you where to go and for providing Tumblr grade, whoa, random, quirky humor. I mean, it's dumb, okay? The music in Pokemon Sun and Moon is about as interesting or memorable as some generic radio-friendly band like 21 Pilots or Shinedown or Nickelback or Godsmack or Five Finger Death Punch or Avenged Sevenfold or Seether or one of those other generic-ass bands that the rock station is playing this week. In other words, it's boring enough to turn off, and bands like that are why I installed an aux jack in my Grand Marquis. I mean, damn, during one of the songs in Pokemon Sun and Moon, I legit thought it sounded like that one hold music that you hear when you call tech support. It's like, do 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 do. Yeah, that song. That's what it sounded like. Now let's talk about the graphics and the engine used in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Now, judging by how the game runs and looks, it's safe to say that Pokemon Sun and Moon runs on the same engine as 2013's X and Y. This means that the game still looks awful, with the same eye-grating art direction and graphics you know and love from Pokemon X and Y. This also means that the game looks and feels lazy. The graphics feature low-resolution pixelated textures that look like Quake 2 running in software mode. Pokemon Black and White also had some improvements in the engine department over Generation 4, such as an improved frame rate and 60 frames a second fast-paced battles, along with more camera tricks overall. While it seems like Pokemon Sun and Moon barely got any improvements over Pokemon X and Y. The game disables the 3D mode in an attempt to fix X and Y's frame rate issues, and this can easily be seen on an original 3DS with a 3D LED. This is also mentioned on the box, which has the game plays in 2D, which is funny because the 3DS's whole gimmick was the fact that its display could display 3D images. On the old 3DS and 2DS, Pokemon Sun and Moon also uses a technique similar to Smash 4 to free up memory by both rebooting the system when the game launches and closes, and by disabling the web browser and Miiverse when the game is open. The overworld in Sun and Moon seems to feature free movement for real, or at least it feels that way. You no longer need a bike, however the D-pad is disabled, so it wouldn't shock me if they did that in an attempt to max the engine limitations. Of course, I don't reverse engineer games, so these are all just educated guesses. One weird quirk about Sun and Moon's engine, though, is you can now no longer walk directly into buildings like you could ever since Generation 1. You now have to walk up to the doors and press the A button to do it. To use your older Pokemon in Sun and Moon, you need to wait till January 2017 until Pokemon Bank gets updated to support Sun and Moon, and you still need to pay $5 a year. That's right, you need to wait months to do something you could do in older generations for free, and at launch day 1. But hey, it's okay when Nintendo does it, right? Some of your favorite absent Pokemon features are still absent. For example, there is still one save slot only. That's right, one save slot. Some features have also been dropped this time around, most notably triple battles and rotation battles. Apparently, the National Pokédex is absent in Sun and Moon as well, because when I googled Pokemon Sun and Moon National Pokédex, I got a link to the Pokemon website saying that it's coming in Pokemon Bank in January 2017. However, the waifu petting feature in X and Y returns yet again, and so does the overpowered EXP share, meaning you can level up all your Pokemon simply by turning it on and running around and battling people. This is not the first time Nintendo has dropped features from Pokemon before, and also not the first time features have been dropped to move them to the cloud. Remember when Berry Farms got moved to the Pokemon Dream World website? Oh wait, that got shut down several years ago, and now your copy of Black and White doesn't let you grow berries, while Pokemon Diamond and Pearl still do. All in all, I have to say this. Pokemon Sun and Moon is yet another game in a waning franchise. While it might have been given a shot in the arm thanks to the short-term success of Pokemon Go renewing the brand name in people's minds and the marketing blitz it got in stores, with stores such as Target being packed to the brim with copies of it, and even placing copies of it next to the checkout line, it's simply not a very good or fresh video game at all. While someone out there is probably ready to attack me yet again for not thinking that the newest Pokemon game is the greatest game ever, and not giving it a 10 out of 10 like some Nintendo website would, I'm going to be honest here. I can be surprised. I've got into games multiple times thinking they'd be garbage before, and come away impressed. For example, earlier this year, a PS4 and Vita game came out called Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, and it flew under the radar. I ran to GameStop to pick it up full well expecting it to be terrible, and thinking if it sucked, then at least I could resell for more money later, considering how Digimon games usually held their value well. It's not a million seller, and chances are it hasn't even sold half a million, but it was probably better than any Pokemon game I've ever played, both in the writing, gameplay, and fun factor. I mean, it's a much faster-paced game than Pokemon Sun and Moon, for one, and it's also on a handheld. I was putting hours and hours into this game, something that I haven't felt like doing in any Pokemon game since Generation 4 in 2007. I tried to give Sun and Moon a chance, and the thing is, it's not convincing me that the Pokemon series is still worth playing. It seems like the only reason people still play Pokemon is because all their friends bought it, because it's heavily marketed to kids, and oh my god, guys, check out this new picture on DeviantArt! Sure, you could argue that Pokemon was never a hard role-playing game or that it was always linear, but when you compare the Pokemon games released on a system with the words Game Boy in it, with, say, any of the 3DS Pokemon games, it's crazy. The newer Pokemon games are so automated, so linear, and so easy that the only challenge is, can you stock up enough items for the next fight? Who needs exploration when you can let the game play itself for you? All in all, I might as well say this to end the review. 8 to 9 years ago, I was a huge Pokemon fan, and I even named my channel Gligar13Vids because of that. 8 to 9 years later, I could care less about Pokemon. I still go back from time to time and play many games I played when younger, such as the Bungie-developed Halo titles, COD 4 and Black Ops 2, Dodonpachi Resurrection, the original Mass Effect, and some more that I can't name for some reason right now. Pokemon is not one of these games, and as the lack of improvement in the series show, it's easy to see why. Because the thing is, Pokemon has stagnated, and it's not getting better. It's just getting worse. That's all that needs to be said about Pokemon. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more, and remember, I spent $40 on this, so you don't have to.